We are now at that point in the medical school application process where you sent off your UCAS application and now you are in the agonizing wait for your interview invites. This video hopes to serve as a kind of guideline to help you navigate the preparation process or preparing for an interview. Hi, my name is Samir. I am a third year medical student at UCL in the UK, and I hope to make this video as a sort of guideline to help you navigate that preparation process. And do not worry if you have not received an interview invite as of just yet, because unis hand out interviews on a rolling basis from December to around March, and it's different with every university. So don't worry too much if you haven't received the interview invite just yet. All you can do right now is do the best preparation that you can. So a quick thing before we go into my advice is there are two types of interview, and you probably already know about them, but they're panel and MMI interviews. Panel interviews is where you're sitting down and there are a few interviewers at this whole station and they're going to be taking in turns to ask you different questions. MMIs are a series of small stations, all with different interviewers, and this means that all the questions will be slightly different and have a slightly different theme. So there are pros and cons to each one, but it's important you know which one the university is doing and whether it's online and in person. So straight into my advice. So like any other skill, interviewing just requires a lot of practice to learn and get better at that skill. So you're going to want to just practice with as many people as you can. Try with friends, fellow friends who are wanting to apply to medicine, your family, teachers, specifically maybe teachers who are involved in biology, chemistry, or helping out with your medical application. And you want to just practice with them, do a timed interview. And this will get you into the swing of answering questions on the spot, your demeanor when you're answering the questions, how to structure your answers, and get the people who are testing you to ask you all sorts of questions. I'm going to go into some types of questions that keep coming up and get your peers who are testing you to just keep asking those questions. Upon finishing any sort of interview with your friends and peers, you're going to want to ask them for any feedback, any pros and cons of your answers, so that you can reflect on this, and then in your next interview, you can implement the feedback that you've received to make it better each single step of the process. I would also not necessarily recommend paying for people to come and interview you. Potentially, if you have the funds, then it's up to you, but I don't think it is certainly necessary to pay for anyone to help you. So tip number 2, we're going to now talk about preparing for specific types of questions. With these medical school interviews, a lot of the questions are quite generic and they do tend to come up a lot of the time. That doesn't mean that they can throw in maybe a curveball and something you're not prepared for, but it's good to prepare for and think about the types of questions that just keep coming up. So I'm going to give you a few examples of questions that keep coming up. And another thing is, make sure you don't script all of them to a T where it just sounds robotic when they come up in an interview. It's really important to maintain that sort of natural ability of talking so it seems as if it's not robotic and you haven't just rehearsed it. Okay, so the first kind of questions that will come up are sort of about why medicine? Why do you want to study medicine at this specific university? So that means you should research the pros of the university you're having the interview at, because it's going to make you stand out from the crowd if you can give some details about the specific university. They'd love to ask you, why are you doing specifically medicine and not another healthcare related course like nursing or dentistry? They ask that a lot. So those are some general questions that always come up. Next, they're going to ask you specific questions regarding to maybe your work experience and your volunteering. And the questions that tend to come up about these can be quite broad, such as just tell me about your work experience and what you learned from them. Or they can ask you specific traits and qualities that you observed on the work experience, such as name me a time that you saw a doctor handling a challenging patient on your work experience. So kind of questions about the traits and qualities of doctors that you observed does tend to come up from what I've seen. Another thing is they love to ask you about your personal statement. So sometimes they'll pick something that you wrote about in your personal statement, like if you did an EBQ or a specific volunteering or research somewhere, they may want to ask you about that. So make sure you know your personal statement inside and out, so that when they ask you, you're prepared to talk about it. Okay, other questions they love to ask you is about wider healthcare research. So they may ask you, like, name a research article that you've read in the news about medicine. That comes up a lot. They ask you about stuff like hot topics and things in the news, like challenges within the NHS. So things like A&E waiting times, junior doctor contract, these kind of historical things that have come up within NHS news, they could ask you about that. So it's good that you know about sort of things that have come up in the news. And I'm going to give you a link to sort of hot topics that come up in the description below. This is done by Medic Portal, and it has a bunch of good hot topics that keep coming up, like euthanasia, abortion, assisted dying. Other types of questions, I think, another one is ethical questions. So they may get you to kind of prioritize certain patients who are in need of a liver transplant. So you may have someone who's quite elderly, you may have another person who's middle-aged, but may have lots of families, lots of people in their family. So they could ask you to really weigh up sort of morals and ethics with that. Make sure, if you can, to mention the 4 pillars of medical ethics. So autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. Almost forgot. So yeah, keep mentioning those pillars. They like to see that you know your pillars well. And I think those are the general types of questions that come up. I'll just have a look to see if there's anything else. So yeah, I think other types we have, so role plays. In MMI specifically, they may ask you to role play. For example, I remember one where in my practice, someone asked me, my neighbor's cat had died, and to kind of comfort them, reassure them. And the person at the MMI station was sort of an actor. So they were doing the role play with you. They want to see your empathy and communication skills being demonstrated. Another type of question they like to ask are qualities and traits questions about you. So they may ask you, what are your biggest strengths and weaknesses? Name me a time in which you have shown leadership. And there's really important that you have thought about some of the qualities that are important within medicine, so like empathy, communication, teamwork, leadership, and show how you've demonstrated them in your extracurriculars or experience. Okay, so those were some of the common questions I remember coming up in my practice interviews and actual interviews. So I will also link down a bank of loads and loads of questions in the link below in the description to give you even more food for thought for some of the questions that do keep coming up, and will help you be more prepared when you go into your interview. I do also want to reiterate that I think practice is still the most important thing. I think even if you go through hundreds of questions and prepare model answers, it's probably not the best because 1, it takes up a lot of your time, and 2, it loses some of the adaptability that is required when you get a random question that may not be exactly what you prepared in the actual interview, right? And it helps to come across quite personal and quite individualized when you are talking and not sound too robotic. So I would still reiterate that practice is important, even though the preparation is key as well. Okay, so the next thing we're going to go into is just developing your answers a little bit more. So a few things that they really like to see in your interview is how you're answering ethical questions. So they want to see pros and cons before you put it all together and give a balanced argument. They really like it if you're putting in those statistics to back up your arguments. It shows that you're really well versed and knowledgeable in the thing you're talking about. Thirdly, I think it's important to give as many personal examples as you can that can kind of fit in. So don't try and just put them in for the sake of doing it. But if you saw something or did some research that links in what you're talking about, let's say within AI, put in that stat or that article that you researched. Another thing is I want to give an example of an acronym that can help you structure or reflection answers. So STARR, that's STAR, right? And whenever you're getting a question specifically to do with maybe work experience or qualities in you, you can go through this acronym. So S is for situation, say the exact situation that happened. T is the task, so say the objective or what you were doing there. A is the action, so what you did to overcome the challenge or show the quality. R is the result, so what happened after you did that. And the other R is the reflection. So they always love to see reflection. It's no point just putting in what you did. You have to say what went well and what you will do next time to implement that. And on top of that, if you can even link that to healthcare in some way, that's great. But remember to not just put things in your answer for the sake of putting it in. Okay, so that's kind of developing your answer. And I think lastly, we're going to go into just on the day sort of preparation. I think it's really important to have that mindset on the day of being prepared. So just prepare the night before. If it's online, make sure the Wi-Fi, speaker, camera is all working. If it's in person, just make sure you know the route there, if there's any delays or traffic, to make sure you're prepared for that. And when it comes to just how you conduct yourself in the interview, that is one of the most important things. So making sure you're well dressed to impress for the interview, nice suit or whatever, just to show that you're professional. And during the interview, make sure you come in, you're friendly, you're polite, introduce yourself, you have a smile, When you're answering any sort of questions, take it nice and slowly, take a deep breath, because you want to come across confident. Because I think the most important thing to bear in mind is you have done the work, you've come this far, you've got an interview, which is a huge thing. So you are more than capable of answering all these questions. It's just in the moment, taking the time to take a deep breath, remembering that you're here to show off. You've done the work and you deserve to be here. So just, you've got this, and take it easy, all right, in the actual thing. And I think that will show through if you're just calm and collected. I understand though it's a pretty nerve-wracking thing. I remember all my interviews were really nerve-wracking, and that's part of the process. But if you can, in the moment, put that to the side and just focus on answering the question to the fullest, you'll do really well. Okay, so that is pretty much everything, my advice for your interviews. I know you're all going to do really well, so best of luck for that. If you have any other questions, please just put them in the comments. I'll try and get to them if you do have any. And that's it from me. So thank you and take care.